We need to take the time to let God prepare us. Sometimes we're ready, we think we're ready, but even sometimes people that are going to need to work with you aren't ready.
Right.
You know, so there's a whole lot that God has to do before we can go do this thing that we want to do.
Let me ask a question that I want your experience on. You have said the statement, don't give up. You got to make a bunch of right decisions, not one. You don't end up with a worldwide ministry by making one right decision. It's a string of them. But at the same time, you've been very circumspect to say that sometimes you get down the road and something wasn't God's will and you give up. When have you ever confused one of those two things, that you're not doing something that's God's will, but you don't want to give up on it because, you know, when do you give up, when do you don't? Is there a story in there of something that you can help us understand when to bail on something or when to stay consistent so that we can finish well?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when you can learn what God's grace is on and what it's not, that is one of the best ways to know whether or not you're in the will of God.
Okay. I want to hear a lot about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, for example, bringing anything through to the finish is hard. There's no doubt about it. You got to be determined. You're not going to give up. Right. But there are things that if God doesn't do them, then you're not going to have a choice. I mean, there's certain things that, you know, like for me in the beginning, when I started, I had to have some kind of child care, I had to have somebody that's going to come along and say, you know, I feel like there's a call in your life, I want to help you with your kids. I didn't have any money to pay them. You know, I didn't even really have anybody proper to ask. And so when I look back, not only do we need God to provide for us financially, but we need God to provide lots of other things in our life. And I was just telling my son coming over here, I am amazed at the amazing people that work for us that have been there 15 years, 20 years. Yeah. You know, nobody's been there as long as me, but some have been, you know, really close. And it's amazing when somebody is that committed to somebody else's vision.
Yeah.
Wow.
So God has provided those people.
Yes.
But if He didn't, I couldn't do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So, for example, sometimes something's not working, not because it's not God's will, but it's not God's time. We're very good about getting ahead of God.
Yeah.
And so, which is understandable. You know, we feel something in our heart, we're excited, we want to do it, we know it's God, but it just doesn't work. I tried to go on television a few years before God put me on television. So I was going to take a few of my lady employees and I was going to do a talk show. And we rented a little studio in St. Louis, got on a couple of free cable channels.
What year do you think this was?
Oh, it's been at least, well, I've been on television it's probably been maybe close to 30 years ago.
30 years ago.
Something like that. And so I was going to do this little interview thing, and it's really hilarious because I'm just not good at interviewing. I'm just not. I ask a question, and then I won't let the person I ask the question to answer. And so,
I'd much rather hear you talk anyway.
So, honestly, I mean, that's not my strong. Now, they've taught me, and I've learned, and I can pull it off decently now, but I mean, if I asked somebody a question, I didn't like their answer, I was really great at rerouting it and getting it around to what I thought. And so, I wasn't any good at it. You know, I had these 5 people sitting there, but I didn't let anybody talk but me. And then,
do you have any of those old tapes that we could show?
I hope not.
If we can find them, trust me, I want to see them. Okay, go ahead.
I mean, even now with my current show, when we started occasionally doing an interview guest, I mean, we had people writing in and saying, will Joyce let the guest talk? And so finally my staff had to come to me, my son and the head of our TV, and he said, we need to talk to you about something. Well, at first I got my back up, you know. It's like, well, don't tell me how to talk. I know how to talk. My show. I didn't know this was going to be comedy hour.
I didn't either.
So they had to talk me off the wall, you know, and get me down to where I would listen a little bit. And so I've learned how to do it better. You know, I can actually, I'm not doing too good on this show, but I can do it better. But you're interviewing me, I'm not interviewing you.
Aren't you glad?
So anyway, I went on, I was trying to do the show, it wasn't working. So in 6 months of being on TV, we got one piece of mail. And there was no money in it. So it wasn't going to help anything.
We'll pay you to be quiet.
Nobody wanted the CD. Nobody, you know, 6 months. And so finally, my lightning fast brain said, this is not working. So the thing is,
I have a tear running down the side of my face.
When you try that hard to make something work and it's just not working, that's probably a good time to say, you know, this may not be God. And so I was just way ahead of myself. Now I'm on television all over the world, but then I couldn't get one piece of mail in 6 months.
Wow.
Because it just wasn't the right time. And so I think that's one of the ways that you can tell if something is right or not. I mean,
what happened then when it was right? Because it's right now. So what was the change? What do you think? What do you think happened? That's a great example.
Okay.
What happened?
Well, first of all, my husband went out and bought a TV camera, which I think I remember at that time it cost like $17,000. Well, I was so mad.
Yeah.
I was like,
yeah.
You didn't talk to me about that. Why did you do that? We don't have that kind of money. And he's like, I just felt like that every time you do a teaching, of course he thinks I'm a good teacher, so he's like, we're losing it. And I don't know what we're going to do with it, but I feel like we need to capture it for something.
Yeah.
So I was like, never going to go on TV because I thought I failed at it. You know, it's just like, I'll just stay on radio and keep traveling, doing meetings, but I won't go on TV. So one morning, Dave was shaving, getting ready to go to the office, and I was trying to get out of the house, and after a little bit, he was in there by himself, and he said, come here, I need to talk to you about something. So I said, Dave, I'm in a hurry. I get to the office. Can we talk later? He said, nope, I need to talk to you now. And God actually spoke to him in a very clear way. And he was just like, you could tell that he was really moved and even shaken. And he said, God said, I want you to go on television. I've prepared you all this time. I want people to get that. I've prepared you all this time.
Wow.
Preparation comes before promotion.
Yeah.
And so we need to take the time to let God prepare us. Sometimes we're ready. We think we're ready. But even sometimes people that are going to need to work with you aren't ready.
Right.
You know, so there's a whole lot that God has to do before we can go do this thing that we want to do. So Dave was over all of our finances and he did a great job at it. And of course, he's having this little communication with God, and he's like, well, we can't afford that. And he actually saw something in the spirit. He saw a hand on a water faucet, and he said he felt like what God showed him is, I've got it turned up this far, enabling you to do what you're doing now. And I won't have any trouble turning it up more, enabling you to do the rest of what I'm asking you to do. Now, it is so hilarious because when we started to try to go on television, we did not know you needed a TV producer. We did not know one thing about what we were supposed to do. That's why telling these stories is so great, because sometimes God calls people to do things that don't know what they're doing.
Right.
Wow.
And if you take it a step at a time, talk about a walk of faith and a journey of faith. I always tell people you step out and you find out. And if you step out and it don't work, then you take a step back and you reroute. And so, I mean, this is just the way God works. Like, somebody a television producer had applied for a job with us a few months before, and we thought, well, we don't need that. We're not on TV. And we just stuck it in the back of a file somewhere. And so then when we started realizing we needed one, then we called him and he became our first TV producer, Matt and Laurie. The first show that we did on TV was done in a little ballroom. I don't even remember where it was at now. I mean, it was little. And the place was in such bad condition. We didn't have any money. I mean, the ceiling tiles were falling down. And it was a real low ceiling, which is lousy for TV. We had one camera, and our backdrop was a blue shower curtain.
Oh, you had a shower curtain too.
But you know what happened? That first day, 125 people called.
Wow.
And so when it's God, it doesn't matter what you don't have if you have Him.
Yeah.
And if it's not God, it doesn't matter what you think you do have.
Right.
If He's not for it, it's not going to work.